make note that on the addendum 4.2, the delegation with regard to Pearson Place has deferred until the Administration and Operations Committee next week, so that will not be happening tonight. And the other two delegations are scheduled and I believe are here. There is one addition, and that's my own, listed under other business. Are there any other items that members of the committee wish to add under other business? Seeing none, then we're in a position where we can approve the agenda. It's moved by the mayor, seconded by Councillor Pierce, the agenda be approved. All those in favor? That motion is carried. There is a declaration, a time for a declaration of pecuniary interest. If you have an interest, now is the time to declare. But if you recognize during the meeting that you have an interest, then declare at that time. As I said previously, we have a couple delegations. Just before I ask them to come forward, you will have to come to the podium. Make sure the green light is on at the microphone before you make your presentation, and the clerk will help you adjust so that you can be heard in the audio. It's a rule of thumb. If you can speak about that far away from the microphone, then we can all hear you. So the first delegation is a delegation with regard to Paris Links Road street name, and actually the second delegation is on the same topic. The planner has advised me that he has a map, and with regard to that street, it might be helpful if he just outlines the map, and that I think will help the delegations as well. He's just going to show you, show the committee where we're talking about. So is Joan Telfer Fox here? Okay. If you just want to bear with us, and the planner is going to explain a little bit about the situation, then you can come forward. Are Gary and Diane Koser here? Okay, and after Joan, you'll come forward as well. Well, the planner is getting the map up. I'll just go through some of the ground rules. We do have 3 public hearings scheduled for this evening, as well as a presentation on the St. George Master Plan. Just simple rules of decorum. Please do not speak from the audience, and please do not speak loudly in the audience because it's difficult to hear. If you need to use the washroom, the door's on my right. Just head through there. If you decide to leave at some point during the meeting, please do not congregate in the foyer because it's kind of an echo chamber, and what you say in there can be heard in here. So either move out, or if you wish to take a break at some point, there is a room in here you can go in and relax and chat with your neighbors if you want, but please don't do it in the audience or in the foyer. When you do make presentations, you're going to be allowed 10 minutes, and hopefully you can keep within that time frame. If not, the clerk will indicate to me that you're approaching your limit, and I will inform you as such, and then ask you to wrap up. The rules of decorum are based on courtesy, and please be courteous to anyone that you're making a presentation about. The rule of thumb during the public hearings, if you're speaking about the application, speak about the application and not the applicant. And hopefully we can get through that all right. Are we ready, Matt? Okay, Matt's going to just outline this particular section of road that the delegation is going to be talking about.
Yes, thanks very much. Through the chair to members of the committee and the public who are able to join us tonight. There currently is a road renaming process going on for Paris Links Road. So just to give a little background here, this development before you that's colored, this is the Paris Grand subdivision. It was draft plan approved through the land use tribunal a number of years ago, and they are just currently going through the process of starting to register the first phases of this development. As part of the development process, West River Road is being realigned. So a section of Paris Links Road is going to remain. This section here over to the west. There's going to be a cul-de-sac at the end here. That's where the end of Paris Links Road would be, and the extension of West River Road. West River Road comes in over on the east, and it would come west, circle up, and then connect here with Paris Grand Road to the west there. We staff have gone through a number of options to determine what would be the best course of action to rename the road, and in light of trying to keep things as simple as we can for mail delivery, for EMS, for fire, it was determined the best path forward was to rename the segment of road, basically starting at the east side here, extending west to West River Road. There are some complications because there is another street nearby named West River Street. So while this seems like it, it is not. It may have some challenges. It is the best option that we've determined, and it is the path that we have chosen to move forward with. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Matt. If you can just leave that map up, that may assist the delegations coming forward. And if that's an introduction, perhaps we can ask the delegations to come forward, and then we can move on from there. Joan Taylor, or Telfer Fox.
Sorry. So the map is just right here if you want to switch back and forth.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yep.
Good evening. You can hear me okay? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you and to the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to present my concerns regarding the renaming of this section of Paris Links Road. I'll draw your attention to the image on the screen, which is a map that was posted on the site in the fall of 2022. And as of last Thursday, I didn't check today, but as of last Thursday, that sign, which is entitled Neighborhood Information Sign, still indicates that that road is named Paris Links Road. So Matt provided some of the information, and so I don't want to repeat what he said, but fundamentally there was a need to differentiate between the western section and the eastern sections of Paris Links Road. Living at 185 currently, I'm in that eastern section along with a number of other neighbors, many of whom are here for support this evening. So according to county staff, they've decided on a preferred option, which is, in their opinion, the best plan, which is rename the road all West River Road. And as he mentioned, though, there is currently West River Road, West River Street, and a West River Lane in Paris. So wanting to have a unique address and be able to have people find us, including EMS, mail, and so on, visitors, this presents a confusing situation, not a simpler situation. And the existing properties on West River Road currently start at the address number 71. The residents were basically informed of this plan in May, and the initial effective date was in early June. So, as I mentioned, we never want EMS to be delayed due to there being confusion between street addresses. Addresses should not be confusing. And I don't know, like it was mentioned that the land tribunal decision indicated the road was to be renamed West River Street, but were they aware at that time that there was also West River Lane and West River Road? Were they aware that there was also these other roads with almost the same name? I don't know. I find it hard to believe. We were not given opportunity to provide feedback on a solution, which involves our addresses being assigned starting with a street number of 10,000. So my address might be something like 10,142. We've received confusing information about what our addresses will be eventually, and we've been told that the effective date for the decision is in August. I find it not logical that the beginning of a street would have addresses in the range of 10,000 anything, and especially not within a settlement boundary. There's nowhere else that I'm aware of that has addresses like that. And once you drive along to the east, about a kilometer and a half, the address street numbers are going to drop down to 71, 72 again. I think that's confusing. And also problematically in June, that there were West River Road street signs that were installed along the newer section where construction is happening, right along Paris Links Road. So right now, if you're driving east along Paris Links Road, you come into the development area. Paris Links Road appears to come to an end. There are West River Road street signs. There's no indication that anybody with addresses of Paris Links Road actually lives further to the east. That is, without a doubt, confusing. Sorry, I've got it. So, in talking with the neighbors and just within my own family, our preference would be that this section of Paris Links Road is given a new unique name. That's something that isn't going to be confused with West River Street or West River Lane, and that it should start with the number 1 at Grand River Street, working its way east, and then West River Road begins where it always has. For us, that's first and foremost a safety concern. Over the winter, there have been a number of closures along Paris Links Road because there was construction, removing a lot of earth, reducing the size of the hill, and it involved us having a detour that took us out along West River Road, along Watts Pond, and then back into Paris. And so that involved at least 5 kilometers of extra driving, which is extra driving time. And I became quite concerned and aware that if EMS, there were people that have subscriptions to newspapers where the delivery refused to deliver to them because of the extra driving. There were packages that didn't get delivered because of the confusion caused. And my bottom line fear is EMS is going to get delayed because there's confusion with the address. And with EMS, as we all know, minutes count. So as much as this is an inconvenience issue, our general attitude is that we accept that there has to be a change of address, street name, to reduce the confusion between the western and eastern sections, but we would prefer that it be a new unique name and not West River Road. And secondly, our request is that there be informational signage put up so that our section, people are still going to be able to find it if they're looking for an address that was formerly on Paris Links Road. For many years, at the western end of Paris Links Road, there was a sign up that said formerly Golf Links Road. And that was because at amalgamation, Paris Links Road was renamed that from Golf Links Road to reduce confusion between identical street names. So that sign remained up until very recently to clarify the situation for people. So it's possible, it's happened, and I think we deserve the same kind of consideration. Thank you very much. That's all my comments.
Thank you. Just there may be questions from the committee if you're willing to answer them. Committee members, have any questions? The delegation? Okay, not at this time, and we have the second delegation on the same topic.
Thank you.
My husband and I and several neighbors are here basically to support Joan. I thank Joan Fox and David McLean, who have done a lot of work behind the scenes for many years about this development. Our concern mainly is the confusion of late with road closures and the necessary things that have had to be done to go ahead with the building of the development. We want to support the suggestion that a unique street name be assigned from Grand River Street North to where West River Road currently exists, with the numbering starting, as Joan suggested, at 1. By the time it reached the West River Road addresses, it would fairly closely align with those numbers and would be far less confusing. And once again, we do ask that a temporary sign be posted. We were unaware that the developer was going to put up West River Road signs on that new hill, that new part of the road. And it's caused a lot of confusion for package delivery and other things, people finding us. So we'd ask if that could be done right away, or cover those West River Road signs until the name change goes through. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Just before, just hang on one second. There may be questions. Questions of Ms. Kozar? Okay, no questions. Committee members, you've heard both delegations, and did you have a question, Lucas?
No, through the chair, I have a motion prepared.
I'll get to you in a minute. I thought you were pointing into the crowd. So you've heard both delegations. Committee members, how do you wish to deal with the issue brought forward?
Through the chair, I have a motion that staff be directed to pursue the renaming of the existing section of Paris Links Road in question and the extension of Paris Links Road with a unique name as per county guidelines for street nomenclature as per the option presented by staff to the public and Ward 2 councilors during consultation.
Could you just repeat that a little bit slower, Lucas? So that people can, I think they had difficulty hearing what you were saying.
Yes, sorry. That staff be instructed to pursue the renaming of the existing section of Paris Links Road that is in question and the extension of Paris Links Road with a unique name as per county guidelines for street nomenclature as per the option presented by staff to the public and Ward 2 councilors during consultation.
And that's seconded by Councillor House. Do you wish to speak to it, Lucas?
Certainly, through the chair. So throughout consultation with the affected members of the public, there was expressed desire for the uniqueness of addresses and particularly with the street name there. The initial proposal back in May included several addresses where there'd be a, let's say, 68 West River Street and a 68 West River Road. There'd be some overlap. So staff came back with the 10,000 XXX numbering. However, the public and myself and Councillor House felt that would also add confusion where you would have The 10,648 West River Road would be adjacent to 72 West River Road, which is not intuitive. And whereas we also have multiple streets with similar road names, West River Street, West River Road, West River Lane, as a consequence of amalgamation 24 years ago, this would be an opportunity to clear things up, and there is precedent with a road changing partway through with the urban boundaries. Silver Lane to, or yeah, Silver Street to Keg Lane would be an example.
Councillor Howes, do you want to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I support the motion and the delegation. I don't blame anybody who dislikes the idea of a 10,000 address on their property. I see that as being problematic, especially when there's only 8 houses that will have these 10,000 addresses, and then the next house starts at 71. And to me, there is some balance to the idea of if you drive up Grand River Street North and turn left, you're on Silver Street until you get out in the country, and then it's Keg Lane. And that just works. And I live on that street, and there's never any problems. To me, it makes sense that if you drive up Grand River Street North and you turn right, you're on Platinum Street, whatever they want to call it. And then once you get out in the country, it's called West River Road. To me, that makes sense. And the 10,000 solution, which I respect, staff wanted to come up with something where there wouldn't be exact duplications to West River Street addresses, but to me, that just doesn't seem a sensible solution. So I support the motion.
Any other comments to the motion? Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, I think this makes sense, especially when we think of the fact that, I'll call it Paris Links as it is right now, is going to go to a cul-de-sac. So it is going to be, in essence, separated from that other road. So I think it would make sense for it to have a unique name on its own. And then whether it's, West River Road continues on from, outside and then up into where it's going to connect onto Silver Street. I think this just makes sense. I approve.
Councillor Miller.
Just, as far as the 10,000 go, I don't think that's an issue. If you get out into the rural areas of Oxford, they got 6 digits for their address, but that's neither here nor there. I just want a clarification on the motion. So you're saying that just part of Paris Links Road, where it weaves into the new development, would be renamed, and then once it got to the original West River Road, it would still stay West River Road. Is that correct? Through Mr. Chair?
So through the chair, the section that we're speaking of that would be renamed is currently named Paris Links Road, but because Paris Links Road is going to continue to the new new subdivision and end at a cul-de-sac, the existing section that's being cut off and redirected will be renamed West River Road. So we're proposing changing the section of West River, what will be named West River Road, that is currently Paris Links Road. And the new part, yes.
Anything else, Councillor Miller? Committee members, any other questions to the motion? Just a comment as well. In the village of Scotland, for example, Simcoe Street goes to Bishop Street Road and Church Street goes to North Scotland Road, and there seems to be no issue, except sometimes the proximity of numbers on one to the other can be confusing, and we had a delegation about that, so you have to be careful about that. I'm prepared to call the question if there are no further comments to the motion, and I believe the motion is consistent with what the delegations are requesting, essentially. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. So staff has some consulting to do with the ward councillors and perhaps the delegations and move forward with the recommendation. And the planner is made a suggestion about signage in the interim, if you just want to mention that.
through the chair to the committee and to the members of the public who are able to join us tonight. So in addition to the renaming, we can also put up some signage to address the former name of the road. So it just helps with any confusion, in the transition time. So.
Okay, just for the members of the public here with regard to that issue, this is a recommendation that will go to council at the end of the month. And if council approves it, which I expect that they will, then we can move forward with the, perhaps a correction, I'll call it, of an issue that has caused confusion. So thank you. And as you make your way out, we will go on to the next portion of the agenda, and that is adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting. They were circulated. The mayor moves that they be adopted, seconded by Councilor Coleman. Are there any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Motion is carried, and the minutes are adopted. Any business arising from the minutes are none listed. And now we go to staff reports, which is a little bit out of order to our usual procedure where we have staff reports after the public hearings. But in this case, we have the presentation from staff on the St. George Master Plan, and it will be followed by another report, which, depending on what happens to the first report, there may be some actions required, and changes to the zoning bylaw, which requires a public hearing process, and that's why we have a public hearing with staff recommendations, if that makes sense. And it'll all come together as soon as we hear the presentations, I'm sure. And just to formally introduce the staff report, it's a report on the comprehensive master plan study for St. George, and our general manager of planning and our general manager of public works will be doing the presentation.
Great, thank you. Through the chair to committee, this afternoon, development services and operations staff were delighted to share with council and the public the St. George Comprehensive Master Plan Study. So I'd like to introduce our project team that's here with us tonight, Rob Walton and Mark Maxwell from operations. And I should note that they have also been closely working with GM Blue Plan, Arcadius IBI, and Burnside on the technical components of the master plan. And then from development services, we have Brandon, Jessica, our summer student Lily, Julie Tott, Matt Vaughn, and Jennifer Boyer, who's not with us here tonight, but she's here in spirit. So as we all know, development in the county of Brant has been occurring at a strong and steady pace for a rural municipality. And the county was in fact receiving many large-scale development proposals in the St. George area prior to the completion of the class environmental assessment for water and wastewater servicing, servicing allocation policy, or an update to the transportation master plan. So on July 26, 2022, county staff presented a report to council and recommended an interim control bylaw for St. George. The County of Brant Council passed this interim control bylaw, which temporarily frees the development of lands in St. George between July 2022 and July 2023. And this bylaw provided the County of Brant time to study and review its land use policies and coordinate servicing for future growth. So an interim control bylaw is a tool available to Ontario municipalities pursuant of Section 38 of the Planning Act. And again, an interim control bylaw places a temporary freeze on land use changes in certain areas of a municipality while the municipality is studying or reviewing its policies. So the restrictions can be imposed initially for up to 1 year, with an extension that the total period of time does not exceed 2 years. So operations and development services staff have been working very diligently to not exceed the 1 year time frame. And we're happy to be here this evening presenting the findings of the St. George Comprehensive Master Plan Study and asking for council's endorsement for the ability of the recommendations to be implemented. The forthcoming this evening under the public hearings under the Planning Act, Brandon and Jessica will be presenting a zoning bylaw amendment to repeal the interim control bylaw and then implement a new zoning provision for the St. George settlement area as a result of the master plan study. Then we will be back next Tuesday at a special council meeting before Admin and Operations Committee for council to endorse the master plan study and to ratify or adopt the zoning bylaw amendment for St. George. It's also important to note that the zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council and is subsequently appealed. If it's appealed, the interim control bylaw would remain in place until the tribunal has dealt with the appeal. It's also important to note that council is not permitted to pass another interim control bylaw applicable to these lands within the interim control bylaw area for a period of 3 years. It's important to note that if the zoning bylaw amendment is passed by council and is subsequently appealed, then the interim control bylaw would remain in place. I already told you that. So I'm going to move to what the project consists of this evening. So the County of Brant operations team has been studying drinking water supply, storage and distribution, wastewater treatment and sanitary sewage collection, stormwater management facilities, and a conceptual road network to address future traffic. And then the County of Brant Development Services has reviewed specifically the natural heritage systems and the policy changes of Official Plan Amendment number 8, which was based on recommendations of the St. George Area Study and various Ontario Land Tribunal decisions, and implemented land use changes throughout the updated zoning bylaw. And Development Services has also been responsible for coordinating the overall comprehensive master plan. So as part of the comprehensive master plan study, there are really 3 main deliverables that you'll receive tonight. First is technical memorandums and a summary of reports, which are annexes to the study document. These technical summaries, again, include water, wastewater, sanitary, stormwater, and traffic. And then the comprehensive master study plan itself. And this study incorporates the background information of policies and technical studies to provide direction on conceptual designs and recommends performance standards, which again is the zoning bylaw amendment. And then finally is the zoning bylaw amendment itself. And that is the recommendation of the study. And it proposes amendments to the zoning bylaw under the Planning Act. Interim control focuses on the implementation of the zoning or land use, which is actually the key component of the study. And it's also important to mention again that the interim control bylaw is in effect for 1 year, which will technically expire on July 25th, 2023. So you can see why tonight's presentation and approvals along with next week's ratification are so very important and timely. I also want to confirm with committee that there has been opportunities for the public and developers to be engaged in the St. George Comprehensive Master Plan study. The steps of the project and the study have been posted on Engage Brant, where the public and developers could answer a survey and provide comments. And the survey and comments were reviewed and taken into consideration as part of the study recommendation. And as well, county staff hosted a landowners meeting and a public open house on Wednesday, May 24th, 2023 in St. George. Both were well attended. And again, the feedback from the public and landowners was invaluable and was also included where appropriate in the study. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to the policy planning team to take you through the land use overview.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pam. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Brandon Courtleave. I'm one of the policy planners on our policy planning team for the County of Brant. So I'll be speaking here just to a land use overview and some more kind of general information about this study that we've undertaken, and then I'm going to pass it off to Mark Maxwell, and he's going to speak to some of the more technical information. So St. George was designated as an urban community identified for future growth as far back as our official plan in 2000 with respect to the county. So a lot of that future growth was meant to be coordinated through area studies, through technical components, a lot of different moving parts. So an area study was completed as part of the coordination of growth in St. George. It was previously completed. It was dedicated to a specific set of kind of landowners and contemplated the large-scale growth that was set to be done on those properties. So that began in 2008. We then also had an official plan review during that time as well with a newly adopted official plan in 2012, so a couple of different moving components. The St. George area study itself was conditionally approved in 2014, and what that did was put together some of those moving parts to speak to servicing, to speak to land use designations, to provide some direction on how to move forward with planning for growth in St. George. So that that area study made some recommendations. One of the key recommendations was to undertake 2 class environmental assessments related to water and wastewater servicing. So those were recommendations that were brought forward in 2014. And those environmental assessments have been underway. One of them is completed, and we're just pending the results of another. Mark will speak a bit more to that. In 2018, we did an addendum to the St. George area study. And this was to update the information based on population growth, based on what we knew now a bit more about the servicing requirements. And like I say, we were studying the solutions to provide the servicing infrastructure throughout the settlement area. So those recommendations of the area study were integrated essentially into Official Plan Amendment number 8 that was undertaken in 2018. That Official Plan Amendment was appealed in part to the Tribunal, which is now the Ontario Land Tribunal. So decisions were made about the development, about the direction through that process, and those decisions were made in 2020. So it's been a lot of kind of different moving parts at different times, decisions made here and there, and one of the major intents of this study from the land use perspective was to put all of that together into one document to be able to provide kind of a transparent and clear direction for the community as we continue to make decisions about growth. So this is what the current County of Brant official plan looks like from 2012 and what Official Plan Amendment number 8 reflected. So it divided the settlement into a primary and secondary settlement area boundary, which was related specifically to servicing policies. It was applying urban designations in one portion and suburban designations in another, and it created a conceptual transportation plan, but that only applied to the primary settlement area. So with our new official plan that was recently approved by council, we noticed that there were some changes that we needed to make. We needed to integrate this information into that plan, but we needed to continue planning for the remainder of the settlement area, so the secondary portion of it, just in case there is servicing brought to those areas. That is the intention of drawing a settlement area boundary under the provincial guidelines, is to service at least the residential portions. And so that is being reflected with our new official plan. So you'll notice it's been brought back just to one settlement area boundary to kind of reduce the confusion there. There's site-specific policies related to the servicing allocation. It reflects the updated draft plan approval, so those that have gone through council, those that have gone through the LPAT. You can see the road networks, the lotting in there to show folks kind of what's been approved already. And again, conceptual transportation planning has been applied to the entire settlement area, and that's something we've looked through or looked at with this particular study as well. So that brings us to the zoning bylaw amendment, which, as Pam mentioned, is kind of a key implementation piece of this interim control. So various recommendations of this study and kind of all of the components that we've looked at are being implemented through, firstly, this comprehensive zoning bylaw amendment that's being proposed. And if the committee wants to move forward and endorse this report, the next kind of portion on the agenda would be then to present the interim control bylaw amendment, this amendment. And what that will do is a couple different things. So this zoning bylaw amendment looks at, first of all, just updating the zoning to show what on the mapping what's been approved already. So it's very clear in the Schedule A mapping, all of the subdivisions that have gone through OLT that have been approved, it's just being consolidated into one spot. It is updating some of the zoning on the properties in St. George where that zoning still remains agriculture. Under the policies of our official plan, that's not an appropriate zoning for properties within an urban settlement area boundary. So what we're looking at doing is rezoning those to the nearest appropriate zone and then applying a holding provision to them. And you'll see a number of holding provisions kind of being applied throughout the settlement area boundary. And the intent of that is to hold that land until we know more about the servicing that will come to those areas. We've made some tweaks to kind of our heritage area overlay as well as the natural heritage zoning. It's been requested through kind of several different aspects to differentiate, especially with natural heritage, between natural heritage features themselves and then the buffer zones we put around them for protection. So we're looking at implementing this in St. George, dividing natural heritage into 2 separate zones to make it a little more clear where the features lie and what can be done where. We're also introducing a new floodplain overlay. And this is to help us through with the GRCA to regulate areas that are subject to flooding or flooding hazard. and that's going to be applied on top, so it's very clear that that applies to a property, and they'll know exactly what development constraints apply to the property. They already exist there, they apply to those properties today, but we want to make it very clear on the map how that's visualized. So this zoning bylaw amendment ultimately is a recommendation of the study. We've done several kind of components of input with this to kind of get ourselves to this point. We've also sent a specific kind of mail out to all the residents in St. George, and I've noticed some of the residents or the folks in the audience have it here as well, that provides some explanations about the zoning changes. There is an online virtual map as well that folks are able to check out. We've had some calls about it. We've been able to walk people through their changes. That's why we've as well left kind of the gap between this presentation and next week's approval. So if there are little tweaks that we need to make, just to make sure that the direction is very clear, we can make those into the draft bylaw, and that will be presented then to council next week for approval. And then just kind of to clarify this as well, we won't make a specific presentation about the interim control bylaw, the actual zoning bylaw amendment, because we'll open that up to kind of public feedback. That's the point of the public meeting, is to collect feedback on it, and that's what we're looking for most through this process. So hopefully that provides kind of an overview of that, and if we do need to clarify some things at that point, we can definitely do that. But with that, I will hand it over to Mark to speak to some of the more technical components of the study that informed our zoning.
Thanks, Brandon. Evening, everyone. I'm Mark Maxwell in the county's operations group, working on the engineering aspects of this study. And I'm going to present 3 different engineering studies that were completed and the findings and recommendations from those. The first one being the transportation and traffic study, which Pam mentioned was worked on alongside us with Arcadis IBI. And what's shown here is the proposed road network that was developed. The objective, of course, is to provide access and safe traffic flow through all of the undeveloped lands to the west of the built-up area in St. George. So you can see what's being proposed there. There's a couple new entrances onto Old Highway 5. And a few things to note without getting into all the details. Draw your attention to proposed road number 1. It's the east-west road following the old rail corridor. And just note that our first look at this proposed connection out to Highway 24 MTO corridor. We looked at that in detail, and then we consulted with MTO, and actually they weren't supportive of that, so that's been removed, and we wouldn't have their support, but also it would come with quite a price tag too. So that's not shown there, but the east-west number 1 road is still there with a connection up to Highway 5 through. It's difficult to see there, but proposed road number 2 that runs parallel with Highway 24. Another thing to note, so we have a north-south road proposed through the Panattoni lands connecting to that proposed road number 1, and a proposed connection into the Oaks of St. George lands if and when that develops. Of course, that would be for a residential connection and to bring a residential transportation network connecting into the existing community. Sign for no trucks. Of course, we don't want to promote trucks going down to German School Road. Moving ahead, the transportation study also looked at active transportation. Again, I see this kind of hard to read on the screen, but it does propose a traffic or transportation network for active transportation following that proposed Road 1 with a connection up to Highway 5 and a connection back into town. So it consists of both on-road and off-road active transportation corridors. The next engineering aspect of the study was looking at servicing allocation. So we developed a service capacity tracking tool. It's very similar to what was developed for Paris and Mount Pleasant. And the output of that tracking tool is what you see here, a figure showing where we're at with a water system capacity on the left and wastewater system capacity on the right. And just in summary, what this is showing is that there's a lot of water capacity right now. The current St. George Water Class EA is recommending a new well facility and water treatment facility up on Howell Road, which will bump that red line, which represents firm system capacity. That'll bump that up to the blue dash line. So there will be plenty of water capacity to support development in St. George. Looking over to the figure on the right, that's representing the wastewater treatment capacity. And I think we all know that treatment capacity on the wastewater side is very constrained right now until the treatment plant is upgraded. So you'll see that the rated capacity of the plant in approximately 2027 gets bumped up to 3,900 cubic meters per day, which will allow development to proceed. And that's where you see those projection lines very flat until 2027, and then they start to ramp up once development can be approved and first phases of subdivisions can go ahead and register. So this is a tool that we're going to continue to use, and we'll update 2 or 3 times a year as new data is available. And the next step is to develop the specific policy for St. George. It will likely look very similar to the Paris policy, but it'll have a lot of details that are specific to St. George's situation. And the next step there is to develop that policy, which we're going to start looking at this fall and into next year. The next engineering study looked at how water and wastewater servicing would be extended out to these undeveloped lands west of the built-up area. So you'll see on this figure that the red arrows are mostly in the Empire communities and Losani lands, where servicing has been studied in depth and basically figured out. Most of those lands flow by gravity to the wastewater treatment plant. So we were mostly looking at lands further to the west of that. And what's shown here is the recommended solution, which is actually a hybrid of 2 different solutions. And it's a hybrid because it really depends on how these lands develop and which ones come forward first. So there's a hybrid to kind of deal with whatever happens. So it might look a little bit confusing, but what it's recommending is the undeveloped lands that are shown as purple could develop on wastewater services, or we could extend wastewater services out to them as a low pressure sewer system that pumps north to Old Highway 5 and then east to the furthest extent of the trunk sanitary sewer, which will likely get to approximately Industrial Boulevard. Now those purple lands could actually flow by gravity to the south to a main pumping station, and that's shown approximately where that red triangle is. It could move a little bit here or there, but roughly to that area, all of those lands could flow by gravity to there. And that would be ideal, except that it's very unlikely that that pumping station would be constructed and in place before all of those purple lands proceed to development. So in the interim, they would, what we're proposing is developing them on low pressure sewers that pump up to Highway 5, and if that pumping station is constructed, there will be an opportunity for undeveloped purple lands to flow to the south by gravity and go to that pumping station, and maybe convert those low pressure sewer areas to flow by gravity to here. But it all depends on development timing. For water servicing, just as a refresher, St. George, the water system is divided into 2 different pressure zones. The lands to the north, which are higher, are pressure zone 2, and lands to the south are pressure zone 1, and it's all based on topography and the land elevation. So we had to look at a couple options to extend water servicing out to the west. Up at Old Highway 5, it would be in the high pressure zone 2, and German School Road would be low pressure zone 1, and somewhere in the middle there would be a boundary. So we looked at different alternatives to extend water out to them, ensuring that we're providing adequate pressures and fire flows and max day flows. And what's being recommended here is the extension of a 12-inch water main on Old Highway 5 out to approximately Highway 24, with some eventual looping for redundancy through the Commerce Drive existing development. And to provide water servicing to the low pressure zone approximately near German School Road, that would be looped from zone 1 to the north. That's what those 2 arrows pointed down are showing, that the water would link back into the low pressure zone through pressure reducing valve chambers. One more aspect to the water servicing strategy is looking at the available storage capacity to ensure that we have an adequate supply for max day and fire flows. So that's what this graph is showing. The orange and the blue bars are showing the available capacity that we have right now in our elevated storage tank and our booster pressure standpipe with booster pump station. So the bar on the left is today. The bar in the middle is considering the build out of draft plan approved subdivisions, which basically includes the Empire subdivision and the Losani subdivision. And on the far right is the full build out to the full community of St. George, all the way out to Highway 24. So what this is showing is we have lots of storage capacity today. We have marginally enough at full build out of those two large subdivisions, but for full build out of the community to provide 150 liters per second of fire flow to employment lands, we do have a bit of a shortfall, about 1 megaliter, which is 1,000 cubic meters. But as I mentioned before, the St. George Water Class EA is proposing a well and water treatment facility on Howell Road. So there's opportunity there to put new storage as part of that construction project. So that's what's being recommended here. One more consideration is how we're going to service lands west of Highway 24 should those lands require or request servicing. Because there is an added challenge to that crossing the MTO corridor. It's very unlikely that we would have or receive approval to install servicing on that corridor, but they have told us that we could cross in a couple locations. So that's what's being shown here on the wastewater side. Again, similarly, we have both options available. If the pumping station where the triangle is shown is built, those lands could flow by gravity down to it. Or if those lands need servicing ahead of that pumping station being built, the option for a low pressure sewer extension would also work for them. The figure on the right is showing how water servicing would work, and that would basically be an extension of a small water main across Highway 24 to service both the orange employment highway commercial lands and also from the south at German School Road to service residential lands. But as I mentioned, the challenge here is not having approval to actually install those services in the MTO corridor. So we would need easements on private property or special conditions to cross that corridor. Oh, and that's it. Thank you.
And I'll just provide a quick summary just to close up our presentation. So kind of a summary and of the recommendations. This is kind of very small, so I'll go over it quickly. But like I said, what we were doing is putting a lot of moving parts together, coordinating them to kind of improve the growth management tactics in St. George. We want to make sure there's an efficient use of land and efficient use of the servicing that's put in. So we're kind of providing the next steps here with relation to water servicing strategy. So as Mark went through kind of the linear infrastructure, the routing for that, same with wastewater. We'll be looking at infrastructure phasing next as kind of a specific outcome of this, as well as the allocation. Those will kind of be the next two key components. And as we said, we looked at stormwater management and transportation as well, and servicing allocation. So we're getting started on the study for that. So overall, the staff recommendation with this report is that the report be received as information, that it be sent to council to be endorsed. We're looking for the final endorsement of the study and approval of the bylaw amendments that we'll be speaking about next. And that will be coming again forward to a special meeting of council next week, Tuesday, which gives us, like I say, some time to make any minor tweaks based on public feedback here, kind of some last minute feedback. And it will allow us to repeal the interim control before the expiry date as well. And with that, I will pass it back over to the chair, and we're happy to answer any questions that are had.
Okay, we have our staff complement here. Committee members, just before I go to you to ask you a question, I just want to make note to the audience that we have had a lot of time to look at the complete document, so we're not relying on this presentation alone. So are there any questions to the document or the presentation at this time? Councilor McAlpine.
So I just had a question recently put to me, and they were concerned that, and wondering whether staff has consulted, say, hydro, gas, telecommunications, and their input into this plan at this point. Are they included, or?
Yeah, so from the zoning perspective through the chair, we circulate all of those folks on the zoning bylaw amendment, the study as well. And they'll be integrated into the specific development application. So that will be kind of more the nitpicky stuff as development applications roll in to coordinate the infrastructure in that manner.
And
could you pull your microphone a little bit closer, John?
Okay, so the other question was, and I think I know the answer to it, it was very preliminary to do this, something on this line, but are we committing to the costs of a lot of this stuff at this point? And I don't think we would be, but
I'm going to say, so this is very preliminary. A lot of the costing stuff will come out of the Class EAs, and we know some of that information as well already. The estimated cost, there's no kind of dedication to that at this point. We are looking to service the entirety of the settlement area. That's the intention. Whether that will happen or not within the horizon of the official plan, that's kind of what we'll explore with some more information on it.
I don't know if I can continue with some more questions, but the transportation master plan, and one of the things that it brought up in the plan was the limitations of 24 and 5, that corner, handling the potential traffic of the 15,000 homes there, and the commercial proposed developments, being able to help handle that without that access to 24. Would that limit the potential of some of this development in the future?
I'll maybe ask Mark or Rob to speak to the transportation component, if they don't mind.
Sure. So I don't think all the details were shown on that one figure, but certainly in the report it does speak to the upgrades that are being proposed for that intersection to handle it, changing the signal timing and adding a couple turn lanes to handle the increased traffic. Does that answer the question?
I was under the impression, though, from this report, though, unless you have that access, say along the rail lines, that corner wouldn't handle it effectively, and then we'd end up with a bottleneck similar to the problem we have downtown Paris. That'd be a big concern to me in the long run.
Okay, so it did consider the sensitivity analysis in that report near the end of whether we did have that new proposed connection to the MTO corridor. And ultimately, it just does put more of a burden on the Highway 524 intersection, and that's where it recommends a change to the signal timing and more turn lanes. So I think it does address the increased capacity that's needed for the long term.
Any other questions? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Brandon or to Mark. I'm looking at a table 2.5.4. It says development potential and approval status summary. And I'm going to be pleased with one side of it and questioning the other. Our newly minted official plan says we're going to have 2,850 households in St. George. And yet you're planning on 5,800, 5,600. I applaud you for that, but can you explain why you're doing that?
You mean why we're planning above what is forecasted?
Why you're planning above what is in the official plan? I think you're doing right, but
yeah.
Can you explain for the benefit of people
Absolutely.
Who may be listening?
Yeah, through the chair. So we've had this discussion a number of times with the official plan. The forecasting that is done through an official plan process for population growth is a minimum. So it's something that comes from the province. We do kind of our analysis on our end to support it, but we see that number. That's the minimum number that we're supposed to support. There's a lot of factors that play into it. One of the ones with St. George is the amount of land that's designated for growth. So that's why you'll see people coming in with these applications to approve more development. And that's why we're looking at kind of those growth tactics, the growth management tactics specifically. So we look at the number that is expected by our official plan. Our official plan is looking at 2051 for this specific number here. So that's the 7,500 people. So when you look at 15,550, that will be, it's our anticipation that that will be well beyond 2051. So many of us in the room, myself included, likely will not be around for that. But the point is that for growth management, we're looking at making sure that's done properly. Making sure the land use components are there, making sure we're holding the development until we have the servicing available, until we have the money for the servicing to put forward. So there's a kind of overarching growth management tactic to that, and we have had these discussions with the official plan process specifically, where we're looking at that idea with Paris to kind of rectify between what is our minimum planning and what we're expecting. If that helps.
So through the chair, so is the numbers you have in here, are they our best estimates of what will be in 2051? Because I think I heard you say it'll be much later. It's not what the report says.
We do have control over that aspect with our phasing, and we know there are significant kind of water and wastewater concerns. So that's why we're looking at this zoning bylaw amendment with the holding provisions, making sure the servicing allocation is in place, making sure that we're looking at allowing that development to move forward with the best tools that we have available to us from the province and from provincial framework.
Can I ask another question, Mr. Chair? Thank you. Through the chair to you, Brandon, what do our major developers, particularly Empire, Lozani and Pinevest, think of this?
So the feedback that we have received through the chair has been positive so far. They understand that we're just kind of putting a lot of the already known things or moving parts together. I suspect, though, as with the development industry, there will be a push for development to move forward in various fashions. But as we said, they're kind of looking at it as organization as well. And the more organized we are with this, especially with servicing issues and allocation issues, so who's going to get servicing and where, the quicker we can get that information together and the more succinctly and specifically, I think the development community is appreciative of that as well.
So just to follow on if I may, so the allocation you talk about, do we have, I wasn't quite sure why we're waiting until we build the water treatment plant before we decide what the allocation process will be. I would have thought we could have done that now, given that we have a model that exists in Paris today.
Yeah.
Why are we waiting 3 years?
That's a great question, and maybe I'll ask Mark to speak to that specifically.
Sure. Yeah, good question. We're not going to wait 3 years. We don't really need it in place until the treatment plant's there and the capacity is there, but there's no sense waiting. We're going to start on it right away.
Thank you. Just one very final comment. So given that input from you, Mark, my understanding is that the developers are chomping at the bit. They'd love to get going as quickly as they can. So how will you guide that? How will you control that? Because if you're saying you have to wait until the water treatment plant is there before you can actually build something, there's a whole lot of servicing work that needs to be done beforehand. When will these developers get the green light to move ahead with their developments?
I think we have to have a level of comfort that we're going to have the capacity available in our plant, and then as we get closer and closer to that, we'll have to make that decision when we allow some development to go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Bell, we're actually with the main developers in the landowners group, we're actually already in discussions and we're developing a Gantt chart as to how this can all work towards when the wastewater treatment plant is the main hold up right now. We hope this fall to actually have the water EA completed. And then we're talking about things like the trunk sewer, which has to be extended through the existing part of town over to service everything. So we're putting this all in the Gantt chart and we're working towards that 2026, 2027 date as to when everything can align up. So we are planning that as well as some of the transportation issues right now.
Any other questions? Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and thank you to Mr. Walton. He just answered one of my questions about the EA for the water is this fall, so that's great. On your, where are we going here? Sorry. On page 7 in your recommendations there, when you talk about service allocation, I think I read in the report there's like over 3,000 draft plan approved already. When we talk about service allocation, with what is already draft plan approved, how, like, that's gotta be years on the list of availability. So I'm just curious as to how that factors in with what we already have approved now. At what point in time are we going to have the capacity, not even adding any more, but to have capacity for what's already approved? Is there an idea of that?
It's a great question. I may ask one of these guys to chime in after, but from my understanding is that will be kind of all allocated through the policy itself, the servicing allocation policy. And like we've kind of said, it is similar to the Paris and Mount Pleasant ones that we've approved. But if there's specific things like in St. George, there's a number of developments lined up already approved, awaiting the registration, right? And they'll need that allocation prior to the registration. So the intention, I guess, is to sort that out at that time, but I don't know if maybe Mark or Rob want to speak to that further.
Through the chair to Councillor Pierce. So the controlling factor in St. George is the wastewater treatment plant, which has capacity of theoretically 1,300 cubic meters, but in reality probably only 1,000 because of some process issues, but we're going to increase that to 3,900. We know already that there's proposed development, which is actually would potentially exceed that. Now, you never know until you get the flows as to what, with water conservation and the water rates, what amount of water people use, what number that actually will be. And as you ramp towards that, you'll have the idea as to how much more can actually be put into there. But as we look at the lands out to Highway 24, we know that can't service all of those, but everybody knows that. So the allocation policy would be very important to put in there, like phasing priorities, and we'll control some of this as to where the pipes are and where people can connect, right?
Right.
So as we develop this, that'll all be built into the policy, and we'll be probably making some decisions as to how we're phasing some projects.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I think that's our only choice at this point in time. But you spoke of the Gantt chart that you've made up for these developers and stuff like that. With the ones that are already draft plan approved, is it going to be first come first serve? How's that all working? If you've got potentially 3 large developments, I'm hoping they're able to work together and do kind of pieces of each. But is there thoughts around how that's going to work? Because to your point, if we gave the green light to what's out there now, it would exceed our capacity with what's already approved.
Through the chair to Councillor Pierce, staff's idea on this is that the first piece of this we control, the trunk sewer, which has to come through the existing part of town, we control that project entirely. The next of it has to go across the Lisani development, mostly. And our goal is that in the first phase of this, that it goes right to Highway 5. And then it's basically to all of the lands. And then the servicing policy then should deal with how we're going to phase the phases, sizes that we're going to allow, and how we then allow that to connect. And then, again, then as we decide where it's going to go, Highway 5 to others, then will be the next consideration.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. Thank you. One last one, if we could, Mr. Chair. In that same part there, when it talks stormwater management and drainage, you talk about low impact development will be applied to the development sites to meet water balance target. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What sort of ideas are you discussing there, or have some of these developers come to us with ideas?
Through the chair to Councillor Pierce. So there are some gravel. There's gravel and the like out there. So infiltration is an option here, and that does exist naturally. So the developers are going to actually be put in the position that they need to try and balance the development as it's proposed to what exists before it happens. So that we make sure that we're replenishing the groundwater, keeping the creeks flowing and the like. So that's the idea.
It's a good idea.
It is a good idea.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question to Brandon. Brandon, the sliver of the St. George settlement area that's slightly west of 24, it's on the map. It's dark orange and light orange. What does that represent?
Let me just check. I believe it's in our new official plan. It will be community corridor. And so what that is it represents that it's along Highway 24. The emphasis there is really the flow of the traffic. So any development that kind of happens, if it's more commercial in nature, it would kind of have to have limited access to the highway in that regard, so that it keeps the traffic flowing. But it does provide mixed use opportunities. But that being said, the policies of the new plan would require that if there is any residential incorporated into it, it would require full servicing. We're looking at the opportunities for the employment lands being just singularly serviced with the water for the time being. So there'll have to be some discussions there about what kind of the highest and best use of the land is, and what approvals can be made through that process.
Okay, because Mark mentioned in the report it talked about not one but two lines going underneath for water, wastewater, and I always thought one was expensive, so two would be twice that. And apparently we don't have to service. Is that correct?
That's a complicated question. We don't have to service, but the provincial direction is that the preferred option is servicing. If you look at the new provincial planning statement that's been released, still in draft form, commenting is still open. They're shifting away from that to provide some flexibility for municipalities that don't have opportunities to provide full services. And we'll kind of reevaluate that once we know what's approved that way. But
and the only reason I'm bringing that up is because it's such a small sliver. So last question then is, if they said, okay, no, we would like servicing, we want to put some residential, who pays for that work, putting those pipes underneath the highway? Would that be just on them, or is that just spread out over everybody through development charges or what?
as far as I know, it's spread out through development charges, but I don't know if I know it's a bit sorry, Rob. I know it's a bit different in St. George with the landowners group and that, so I'll ask maybe to chime in.
Through the chair to Councillor Miller. Talk about a complicated question. So, yeah, no, it'll be a combination of development charges and connection fees to the properties that are actually connected up.
Okay. I mean, if I had my choice, I would say just leave them be and let's save the money. But I guess there's still a few years from that. So
there have been requests for services from some owners across the highway.
Oh, it's already happened.
And the whole thing is, they got to weigh out their costs of that, their development costs versus what they can do and the like. So it's probably for some of them it's worth it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mayor Bailey.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the first crossover would be at Highway 5, and the second one you said would be piped down to Blue Lake Road? German School Road?
German School Road, yeah.
Okay,
I don't think I think one of the notes in the study is that it just needs to avoid the intersection. So it won't be directly at the intersection, but it will be in proximity.
Thank you.
Are there any final questions? Committee members, there is a recommendation proposed. Does someone feel comfortable in moving that? Councillor Bell moves it and Councillor Pierce seconds it. Are there any other questions or discussion with regard to this phase of what essentially is a three-phase, three-step process here? You can't. All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. I don't want to be rude, but you can't speak from the audience. I'm sorry, you can't speak from the audience, sir. You may have the opportunity in the next phase, which is the second staff report, and that is to deal with the amendments to the bylaw and the agent control bylaw. It's my understanding that this has to be done in the guise of a public hearing. Correct. And so what I'll do is I will call the public meeting order, then I will ask staff to make the presentation, and then I will open up to the public, and anyone from the public that wishes to make comment can make public comment at that time. So I will move on to the next part of the agenda, and that is the 9.1, or is it 8.1? It's 8.1, and ask, I'll declare the public meeting open and ask staff to make a report on the issues before us.
Wonderful, thank you. I will keep this component brief because we do want to hear from the public, but this is specific to the zoning bylaw amendment application here that the county is presenting as a result of the interim control bylaw study. There's some good summary points actually in the update that was sent around to the community. So we've looked at, like I said, reevaluating the lands that have an agricultural zoning, and we'll be placing those into kind of a more appropriate zoning within the settlement area boundary. We looked at a review of the natural heritage zoning, the heritage area and the heritage area overlay, floodplain information as well. And so really all of this stuff is very technical in nature, the changes that are being made. None of the permissions really on properties are being changed, except those that would be changed from agriculture to something within the settlement area boundary. So whether that be residential or employment, whatever the designation is underlying. And then those holding provisions are being applied to ensure that the proper servicing is given to those properties based on what they propose to do. So I'll leave it maybe just with that high level summary, and if there are specific questions or comments from the public, we're happy to address those as well. Ms. Staff.
Before I go to the public, I'll ask committee members if you have any questions to the planner with regard to this report. Excuse me, sir. If you just hang on a minute, you'll get your opportunity when I call on you. Committee members, are there any questions? Now, since I see no questions, it is now the public's opportunity to make comment or questions. Sir, if you wish to make comment, you must come to the podium, state your name, address, and away you go. And I thank you for your patience.
My name is Terry Smith. I live at number 3 West Street in St. George in the designated heritage area. And for conflict of interest purposes, I'm also on the board of directors of Grandbridge Energy. And Councillor McAlpine raised the point. The cost of servicing this area with hydro is going to be extremely substantial. I don't know the exact estimates, but it's in the order of $40 to $50 million. That is not reflected in this official plan, but I'll get to my specific comment. I believe what the council just voted on was to implement the recommendation of the plan committee and to seek approval for that at the full council meeting on July the 26th. That was not mentioned in the notice of the public meeting this evening that came through the mail to all of us. That was not mentioned. But in my opinion, it appears that we are implementing the engineering study. But in my opinion, I'm a professional engineer. The engineering studies are incomplete. They mention on the slide presentation I saw today a consideration of cultural and environmental impacts as well as the physical things of water, wastewater treatment and roads. I don't see any impact of that in the mentioned study. And that's from Blue Plan Engineering. That's their presentation. They assigned ratings of high costs, medium costs, and low costs to all the aspects of this thing. No actual dollars, just directional statements. And they included comments on the cultural and environmental impacts. I also noticed that this study takes no consideration whatsoever of a carbon footprint or a reduction therefrom, or the impact that this study will have on the reduction of our severely impact our environmental impact. But we are going to not, but no mention of a carbon reduction target in these studies. So my opinion is that the engineering studies are incomplete. But I would ask one thing, in that as none of these engineering studies and all the things you'd like to do with sewers and water treatment plants and so forth, I get all that, and the roads. Comment about the roads, by the way, you keep talking as if the only transportation impact is going to be westward towards Highway 24. I suspect that the vast majority of these development people are going to go eastward through the centre of St. George, through that traffic light, to go towards Hambledon and Burlington. That's just a comment. But the The reason my question is that you have the opportunity to extend for one more year the existing bylaw that places the temporary hold. Why wouldn't you just extend that 1 year and, before we leap ahead on this thing, actually develop hard costs for what is being proposed? Because I believe the cost of this infrastructure, I don't believe it is fully recovered by development costs. I really don't. And I'd like to see the numbers before we even think about charging development charges. We don't even know what it's going to cost. And at the moment, I can tell you from a perspective, something that you'd be interested in from the county, because of the new paramedic facility at Savannah Oaks, the construction costs of that thing are they're going to be very, very expensive very quickly. The original construction estimates that were done last year do not match the reality that we're facing today as we go out for quotations. So my opinion is, and my question is, why don't we extend the existing interim control bylaw for 1 year, recognizing it can be challenged, while we develop firm cost estimates for the proposals that are in this engineering study? That's my question.
Thank you, sir. Just before you come forward, I'm talking to the planner. Thank you for your comments. I'll give the opportunity for anyone else in the audience that wish to make comments with regard to this issue. Anyone else in the audience wish to make comment? Seeing none, I'll ask the planner to come back and perhaps speak to the comments from the public.
Through the chair, so thank you for that question. That's a great question. So interim control is a tool under the Planning Act, so it really is related to land use. We did take this time to get into our engineering studies to inform land use. If you extend your interim control past the first year into the second year, it can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So that would open us up to that opportunity for appeal without anything being presented, any kind of results of the study being presented. And as staff, it was our opinion that we were at a point in the study, in the results, that we could address the land use issues without the need to extend interim control. I'll also just say the province has recently changed their tune on interim control. So interim control bylaws were not able to be appealed when they were first introduced. The province has changed that now. So even if we were to introduce a new interim control bylaw somewhere else in the county of Brant, hypothetically anyone could appeal that to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So that tool has been kind of dismantled a little bit. So with that in mind, that's kind of the commentary I'll provide on that. Hopefully that answers that question, but if there's any further clarification, it would help.
Thank you. Committee members, you've heard from the staff, you've heard from the public, and you've heard a response from the public. Do you have any further questions or comments with regard to this particular issue? There's a recommendation before you. Does someone feel comfortable making that recommendation? Councillor Coleman moves it. Councillor Oakley seconds it. It's my understanding that this is a recommendation that we'll be going to council at a special council meeting prior to the admin op committee meeting, which is next Tuesday. Any final questions or comments to the resolution? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. This recommendation will go, as I said, to the special council meeting scheduled prior to the admin op committee meeting next Tuesday. And that, I believe, concludes that part of the agenda with regard to the St. George servicing or master plan and the interim control bylaw, etc. And we'll pick that up again at the special council meeting next week. Now, I believe this takes us to the section of the agenda where we do public hearings. And there are 3 public hearings scheduled for this evening. And the first one being a public hearing to present an application on 378 Harley Road in New Durham. As the planner comes forward and is getting set to make a presentation, I will declare the public hearing with regard to the zoning bylaw amendment proposal at 378 Harley Road now open. And I'll ask the planner to present the application. And just before you do, Amanda, for the ladies and gentlemen in the audience, this evening we're going to receive public input. There will be no decisions made on the application. After receiving the input, we normally refer it back to staff to bring forward a recommendation, which will be brought forward at our next planning committee meeting, and that is when decisions will be made and discussions will happen at the committee level to make recommendations to council. But for the purposes of this evening, it's a public hearing to receive input, and that's what we'll do. So, Amanda, carry on, present the application.
So thank you, through the chair. So a major zoning bylaw amendment has been received for the lands municipally known as 378 Harley Road within New Durham. Specifically, the subject lands are located on the north side of Harley Road, east of the intersection, east of Mere Road. The subject lands have a frontage of 73 meters along Harley Road and a land area of approximately 2.54 hectares. Currently, the subject lands are occupied with a single detached dwelling. There's accessory structures, and there's a structure at the rear that has a kennel permission. In regards to the development proposal, the applicant is specifically seeking to amend the existing site-specific provision of A-51 to permit the outdoor storage and warehousing of precast concrete products and accessories. And they are also asking to amend a portion of the subject lands from A-51 to residential hamlets to permit a townhouse development. In regards to the official plan, the subject lands are designated as hamlets and villages. And in regards to the zoning bylaw, the subject lands are currently zoned A-51, which does permit a kennel with a maximum of 10 dogs. In regards to the application process, we are currently in the information process. Staff have not prepared a recommendation report at this time. In regards to public comments, I've received a few. In general, just to summarize the public comments, I've received some comments just questioning compatibility, noise, the functionality of the site, how the storage of the precast would work, the size and scale of the townhouse development, and just the increase of traffic in New Durham. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Are there any questions from the committee? Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Amanda, can you maybe answer some of those questions that you got from the letter writers? For example, how big is the townhouse? How many units would it be?
So through the chair, the applicant is proposing 36 townhouse units on the subject lands, in addition to retaining the existing structure that has like kennel permissions.
Okay, and if I look at the map you have of the development proposal, that this townhouse would front onto Harley Road, then is that correct? On the bottom right-hand corner of the property?
Yes, through the chair. So the entrance would be via Harley Road and kind of go through the property to each of the respective locations of townhouses.
Okay, two more questions. Second question, obviously this would have to be all on private services, correct?
Through the chair, correct.
And it's interesting because there's other development going on in New Durham. What I want to ask is, one of the letter writers commented that they have a berm in behind their property, and this berm is to be removed. I don't know why. Do you know anything about that you can share today?
Through the chair, I don't know anything about the berm right now, but through my recommendation report, I am investigating the location of the berm and like where specifically that is in relation to this application. And in the recommendation report, I'll have further information for council.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the planner? Seeing none, the applicant or the applicant's agent are here, and this is your opportunity to expand upon your application to the committee and to the members of the public. And if you can identify yourself and give your address, you can proceed.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah, my name is Mike Gour. Sorry, good evening all first. Yeah, my name is Mike Gour. I'm here on behalf of Stubbies. That's the applicant of, or the, yeah, for the applications for. So the biggest thing is I know some people are saying 36 townhomes. That's a lot of homes for the town of New Durham. So most of the, or basically all of them would be for our employees. So right now, currently in New Durham, we have 3 or 4 houses that we rent out to employees. And over the last 2 to 3 years, we've had a lot of employees request if they can rent those houses. So we see this need for this. And then usually what happens, you rent these houses out to our employees for below market rate. They usually live there for 2-3 years, save on rent, on gas, going to work, and then they're able to afford a down payment to buy basically what everyone's dream is to own their own home. So that's basically what this housing is for. And the other one is we've been struggling the last 2-3 years with the cost of housing going up and the interest rates and all that stuff. Is we find a lot of employees that the cost of living is just getting too high. So they're actually moving out of province, moving to Northern Ontario. So basically as a business thought was if we can help these employees out, retain them. And so basically we received and looked at a lot of the comments of the neighbors. And we do appreciate them. To be honest, some of them, I didn't think of, and that one's a good one. Is I think we can incorporate more green space into this to make it more of a nicer living environment. Then also, we have performed numerous studies for the septic, the wells, hydro-G studies, and stuff like that. Is with the planners, so we'll see what the we can go from there. So, and closing, I'd like to thank everyone. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Are there any questions? Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenter, do you have any info on that berm question?
Yes, that berm is on our property, on the property of 378. So basically, that berm would be replaced with, if this all got passed, with basically a townhome.
Just one more
So
question.
that berm was put there, I don't know, probably 10 years ago.
One more question, Mr. Chair. The exit, it would exit directly onto Harley Road, or would it be combined with Stubbies?
So the residential would go onto Harley Road, and the back piece would be combined with Stubbies.
Thank you.
Councilor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenter. Can you expand a little on the septic and wells you're talking about here? You're talking, 36 units, which is more than what's in New Durham right now. In that spot, I'm curious how you're going to facilitate water, number one, and septic.
So septic is, we've done basically your geotechnical studies determining what type of soil's there. And we do have the septic design for 36 units, counting on how many bathrooms, according to code, is needed. And that's at the county level right now to review. We haven't heard comments if they agree with the design or not, but we have submitted a design showing that it will work. That's for the septic. And then for the wells, we have done a hydrogeology study proving or stating that there is enough groundwater there to support the wells for this development.
Okay, so just to confirm, these studies are completed or will be completed?
They have been completed.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I'm just wondering if you could outline some of the other studies that you have completed to support your application, not only for the expansion, but for the townhouse proposal.
Yes, I believe I can. So you have the list of one? Yes, so we've done site plan, engineering, survey, PGR, swim and servicing, geotechnical, archaeology, and hydrogeology study.
And in order to make the application complete, these studies would have to been
Yes, that's correct.
carried out.
Thanks, Amanda.
Any final questions of the applicant before I excuse him and go to members of the public? Thank you. Just stand by. Usually what happens is if there are questions or comments from the public, you have the opportunity to come back and speak to them before we close the public hearing. Now, let me, we have, hopefully we have Mr. Duncan online. Can you hear me, Mr. Duncan?
I can. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm going to go directly to you since you are here to speak to the proposal while we still have our connections. And for those in the audience, Mr. Duncan is online and you can follow along there. Mr. Duncan, you have the opportunity to make comment on the proposal.
Thank you. I did send a letter forward to the planning department. Unfortunately, it seems to have disappeared. I'm trying to go over this quickly. It was all in the letter. To begin with, the signposting was not put up for the 21 days that is in the Planning Act. So we didn't have the time for the public meeting that we were supposed to. There's different aerial photograph pictures used on the application for copies sent to the residents and copies sent to the county. It's confusing. Even the mail out to the residents was different aerial than what's being shown. Part of that is the fact that the proposal is asking for storage space in the back. It's already been taken. What they're asking for, they're already using. There's already a road going from 382 to 378. That also is shown on the aerial. The aerial will also show that the property zoning falls under agriculture related industry 6.3. There is quite a few restrictions on that. A vegetation protection zone is no less than 30 meters for wetlands, and yet there's a bridge and a road over it that shows up in the aerial. The maximum coverage for 382 shall not exceed 30%. And yet if you look at the picture, it's 100%. There is zero green. The majority of the product processed under 6.3 shall be from the farm operation. But there is no farm operation. There is no agricultural products being produced. The agricultural related use under 6.37, the agricultural related use shall be secondary to the principal farm operation on the subject lands. 382 on the plan is labeled as agricultural land. It is not. There are other restrictions on further properties adjoining this coming under agricultural employment 29, a maximum lot coverage of 10%, a bunch of other requirements that lot coverage maximums, landscaped open space, none of those are being obeyed. This application is asking for an undefined zone, residential housing XX, that does not define it as high density or low density or anything. We have no idea how many people 36 units represent. So how can we know whether the septic will handle it? As to the letters the increase in very heavy truck traffic over the last bunch of years has caused a whole bunch of road repair within a 10-mile radius, including 3 bridge repairs. The population of New Durham right now is about 50 people. You're talking about 36 units of a family of 4 plus guests. You're talking about 216 people. School buses, traffic. There's a whole bunch of things that have not been looked at. The devaluation of the homes up front with the removal of the berm that was put in place for noise reduction. And there's no plans here to put anything in its place for the noise reduction that the applicant put in to begin with. I think final thoughts on this are that it goes completely against your new plan of preserving agricultural land. The storage and continuous growth is not within the plan, nor is it on properly zoned land. This should be agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. You had indicated that you had put this in a letter. Could you make sure that your comments could be put forward in written form and provided to the planning department so that your comments can be placed on record?
I did send this to the planning department and the clerks. I did get a confirmation from the clerk stating that it was forwarded to the planning department.
Okay, we will.
Yes, I will. Absolutely, I will send another copy of it if that is your question.
Yeah, we'll try and track that down so that members of the committee can have that prior to the issue coming forward at the next meeting where discussion and decision will be made. But just to be clear, if you could indulge us and resend that, perhaps it would be helpful. And I thank you for your comments.
Yes, I will resend it. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any members of the public in attendance who wish to make comment on this proposal? And as you come forward, you can just remember to state your name and address, and you have your 10 minutes. Green light.
Sorry. Danielle Najadlik, 367 Harley Road. I'm going to echo a lot of what Les said today. It's not a matter that we have an issue with there being more development in the community. It's the kind of development that's being made in the community. High density doesn't fit a residential hamlet, and I apologize for that. And I understand that there are employees who are looking for, more affordable housing. Stubbies has bought property in Norwich, built there. From that aspect, that's where we stand. I've talked to a lot of neighbors who feel the same way. Also, Stubbies has continued to build further into the residential portion of the community. It has to stop somewhere, and that's all.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Before I call a final time, I just want to make it known that we have received emails and letters that are on record and will be consolidated with the report going forward. Anyone else wish to make comment with regard to the application on the Harley Road in New Durham? Seeing none, I'll ask the applicant if they wish to come back and respond to any of the comments that were brought forward. And for the benefit of Mr. Duncan, who can't see, the applicant is not coming back to respond.
Thank you.
Members of the committee, since there are no further public comments, the applicant has made the presentation. Is there anything final from the planning department before I proceed to close the public hearing?
No further comments, thank you.
Okay, then with regard to this application, the public hearing is adjourned. So what that means is we've heard from the public, we've heard from the applicant. This committee must now deal with the information. How do you wish to deal with the information? Councillor Miller?
I'll move to receive, Mr. Chair.
And that's seconded by Councillor Coleman, that the information be received and consolidated in the report that will be presented with the staff recommendation at a subsequent planning committee meeting, which will probably be next month. Speaking to the resolution.
Yes, Mr. Chair. After hearing the comments from the public, I'll just throw it out there, but I'm going to ask if maybe staff could maybe look at alternative planning methods of maybe making this happen. I know, like, if we look at a lot of farms, we know we have a lot of on-farm help that lives on the farm.
Councillor Miller, this is the kind of discussion that happens at the.
No, it's just a simple open request to staff. Maybe when they do their homework on this, that they could maybe look at all other alternatives based on the comments we've heard tonight. That's all.
I'm now prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. So that information will be consolidated in a report which will be presented at the council meeting immediately following the next planning committee meeting. The next public hearing is a public hearing with regard to, I believe it's the one on Colburn Street, Bishopsgate Road. So I will declare the public hearing with regard to the application from Karen Spearenberg with Paulson Construction on 1318 Colburn Street West. And ask the planner to introduce the application to the committee.
So thank you through the chair. An application for a major zoning bylaw amendment has been received for the lands municipally known as 1318 Colburn Street, specifically from Paulson Construction on behalf of Ethos Automation. The subject lands are located on the western portion of 1318 Colburn Street, specifically south of the Colburn Street and Bishopsgate intersection. The subject lands as an entirety has an area of 52 hectares, but the applicant is proposing to develop 9.6 hectares of the total subject lands. Surrounding land uses include agricultural, residential, and employment. In regards to some background on this subject lands, there's been a few applications for development over the years, and I just wanted to give a preliminary, like a high level summary. So in 2012 and 2020, Triggers and Bows and Roswell Concrete were created on the subject lands. In 2022, 3 industrial land users were also created on the subject lands, and they're currently going through the respective planning processes right now. And in 2023, we have this new application, which is more to the northern portion, and they are proposing to industrial land users. In regards to this specific development proposal, the applicant is proposing to rezone a portion of the subject lands from agricultural to light industrial, so that M2 zone. And they are also proposing a site-specific parking reduction of 35%. They are proposing 2 employment warehouse buildings that'll have a phased development, and they're also proposing a shared access easement. So should the rezoning application ultimately be approved by council, the applicant would be required to proceed to the Committee of Adjustment to sever those 2 properties and to establish that shared access easement. In regards to the official plan, so the entire subject lands are zoned as employment and agricultural, but the portion to be developed and specific to this rezoning application is designated as employment. And then similar with the rezoning, the entire subject lands are zoned agricultural and have some site-specific provisions for light industrial and heavy industrial. But this portion to be, the applicant is proposing to rezone is just currently zoned agricultural. Currently, the application is in the information process. Staff have not prepared a recommendation report as of yet. In terms of public comments, I did receive a few. In general, the public comments were just in regards to noise, traffic, and just kind of like the functionality of the site as well. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Are there any questions of the committee to the planner? Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one concern, and that's regarding noise. There's two letters, one in our package, one in the addendum, asking about the noise. And the question from the one letter is, are there any plans in place to deal with our concerns? Noise barriers, fencing similar to what was installed along Rest Acres Road subdivision. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff is at what point do we deal with those concerns of noise for people who are on the other side of Bishop's Gate not being a very wide road, 2-lane. All those employment lands have now been spoken for. We know the truck traffic's increasing. Do we deal with that in the planning matter, or do we leave that to Public Works? How do we deal with that?
So thank you through the chair. Great question. So through the rezoning application, the applicant did submit a noise impact study, which was part of their planning justification report. So it did speak to some noise considerations, specifically the D6 guidelines, since they are proposing an employment use in close proximity to existing residential. It is currently being reviewed. And then in terms of specific mitigation measures, typically they are established, they are reviewed through site plan control. But in a rezoning application, there is the ability to impose a site-specific setbacks that further set the building back from existing residences. Currently, they are approximately 70 to 77 meters setback from existing residences, but all of that is being reviewed through the site plan, through the rezoning application currently.
Okay. We'll have more discussion later, but I thank you for the answer.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Amanda. Is the planner here to elaborate on the proposal? If they are.
Through the chair, the applicant is here, but I'm not sure if he has anything he would like to add. I'm seeing no. Okay.
Okay. However, I would ask you to come forward. There may be questions of the committee that you may be able to answer. So if you can come to the podium and just identify yourself as the applicant, and for the record, officially state that you have nothing to add, and then I will ask the committee if they have any questions of you.
Good evening. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm Paul McKeag from Paul Sane Construction, and we're the applicant and plan on developing this piece of land.
Are there any questions to the applicant from the committee members? Well, after all that, I brought him up here. There must be there has to be a question. Okay, Mr. Councilor Miller.
Just one,
I goaded you into it.
Maybe it's not a fair one to ask him, but my understanding is, don't make a liar on me, but I've been telling people, I don't think there's manufacturing going on at the facility. It's mostly they develop new products. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, Councilor Miller. The product, it's not actually manufacturing. It's not heavy manufacturing as you would once have imagined. It's actually assembly of high-tech components to be assembled, programmed to make work, and then disassembled and taken off-site to another facility.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
I have a question. One of the concerns of the neighboring residents is the noise related to the traffic, not so much the activity on site, but the traffic that's generated by the site. So could you just maybe elaborate on what traffic you can expect from the operation on the site that would add to the problems associated with the noise associated with traffic.
Okay, yeah, certainly through you, Mr. Chair. The normal day-to-day traffic would be for employees that come and hopefully bike to work if they live nearby, but they are employees that will come in and out. As far as deliveries and transportation aspects of it, it's intermittent because they may receive a truckload of material one day, but they might be 3 months assembling the materials in a product line, basically. So it will be very intermittent, maybe 4 to 5 trucks a week is what we've been indicated. So they need a lot of floor space to put everything together, and then they package it up and take it away, and it's a very long process, a long product cycle.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I would just ask the applicant then to just stand aside, and I will ask members of the public if they have any comments or questions. You can just leave the podium. Now, members of the audience, this is your opportunity to make comment on the proposal. Are there any comments from the public? Second time and a final time. I keep asking for people to come forward and nobody wants to come. There's nothing wrong with that. I would just state for the record then that there have been a few letters and emails received, and they made specific requests, as Councillor Miller suggested, that they want their emails become part of the record. Okay, since there are no questions from the public or comments, the applicant is not required to come back to answer the questions. So if there's anything further from the planning department on this application?
No further comments, thank you.
Then I'll proceed to close the public hearing and ask the committee how they wish to deal with it. Councillor Pierce.
Move to receive, Mr. Chair.
And it's seconded by Councillor Kyle that the application or the information be received and consolidated with the report coming forward at our next meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. The next and final public hearing is a public hearing with regard to Curtis Avenue and the applicant Telephone City Aggregates. So I'll declare the public hearing open and ask the planner to introduce the application to the committee.
So it's me again. So a major zoning bylaw amendment and subdivision application has been received for the lands owned by Telephone City Aggregates in that Curtis Ave area. In regards to the property location, the subject lands are approximately 46.8 hectares. They are generally undeveloped at the moment, and surrounding land uses include general commercial, agricultural, residential, and then there is a CN rail and Trans-Canada Trail in close proximity to the subject lands. In regards to the development proposal, the applicant is proposing a number of rezonings just to implement the proposed industrial subdivision. These rezonings include heavy industrial and also light industrial, some natural heritage, just because some identified natural heritage features, and a commercial component identified as number 1, closer to Dundas Street. In regards to the official plan, the subject lands are currently designated employment, and they are located within Site-Specific Policy Area 16, which identifies this as a priority employment area. Other portions of the property are designated as general commercial, agricultural, and natural heritage, but the predominant designation of the subject lands is employment. And then in regards to the current zoning bylaw, the subject lands are zoned as agricultural, natural heritage, resource extraction, and heavy industrial. Currently the application is in the information process. We are recommending tonight that the information presentation be received as information. And then in regards to comments received from the public, I have received a few. In general, they are again in regards to compatibility, the functionality of the site, connections to the existing road network, increases in traffic, required road upgrades to facilitate the proposed industrial subdivision. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee members should have.
Councillor House.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Amanda. I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. The area marked section 8. In this proposed rezoning, would there be industrial businesses in that area, or would it just be natural heritage?
Through the chair. So this portion identified as number 8 is just solely to be proposed as natural heritage. They're within the natural heritage zone. They cannot do the employment land uses. The agent is here tonight, and they can also confirm that understanding as well.
Okay, I'll bring it up again later with Dave.
Any other questions from the committee to the planner? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Amanda. Reference to section 6 and 2 is the general commercial area which abuts Dundas Street. How would you get access to that parcel?
Sorry, through the chair. Which number?
I think it's number 2.
Number 2.
Number 1, sorry.
Number 1. So, through the chair, they are proposing to rezone that from agricultural to automotive commercial and general commercial. That access would be provided via Dundas Street.
That's, through the chair, it's very, very close to the railway bridge, if I recall. It's going to be interesting to see how people get in and out of there, given that we've put in, I think, council's passed a pedestrian walkway through that system.
Through the chair, so that entrance is, so this application has been circulated to operations and development engineering, and as part of their review, they do review existing accesses and how it would facilitate if they were to rezone it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks, Amanda. I know the applicant is here because he's listed on the agenda as 931, and that is simply a fancy way to introduce the applicant in the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess being recognized as a number maybe isn't so bad sometimes. I think my presentation, one day I'll figure this out.
It's hiding.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight, and thanks to Amanda for the overview presentation. We've been working on the subject lands with the county for some time now, and these lands specifically this evening relate to what we call the Sharp Road Industrial Subdivision. The lands are highlighted there in red, and they're separate parcels. There's actually 3 separate parcels. The kind of portion fronting onto Dundas Street, there's a split there because of an old spur line. And then the portion that's kind of a polygon to the west of the kind of longer rectilinear piece is a proposed stormwater management facility. And what happens is the land in between there is separated by the rail trail, and then additional lands that are owned by TCA. So that gives you some idea how everything's fitting together, but TCA owns kind of the majority of the lands that surround the industrial subdivision to the southwest. The proposal is for an industrial plan of subdivision. There's a block that fronts onto Dundas Street that was referenced that includes future commercial related uses. There's an emergency access servicing corridor identified in that location. So that's emergency access only, and it's there really because the servicing needs to come through from Dundas into the industrial subdivision, and ultimately also assists in servicing with the residential subdivision, which on this plan is Plan South. So the emergency access really would be in case of emergency, as we're looking at different alternatives for access into the industrial subdivision and also into the residential subdivision that is in process and under discussions with county staff. So this proposal is providing for, I think it's called Street A, or ultimately a Sharp Road extension, east to west and then north to south into the residential plan. And that would simply be the extension of the existing Sharp Road. There's lands identified as open space that would be zoned open space that are natural environment areas. Those have been identified through an EIS, and we're working through the details of that with county staff and GRCA. You can see in the block that's kind of separated to the bottom of the plan, that's the proposed stormwater management pond for the industrial plan of subdivision. It's located there because really it's the most efficient location for the pond, being the lowest location in the area associated with the industrial lands. And also it's located there to provide for efficient use of the lands that were identified for future industrial, rather than taking up that large portion of land within that area for stormwater management. So that would be zoned open space and outlet down to the south toward an existing tributary that ultimately outlets to the Grand River. And so a portion of that pond is open space, and a portion of that pond is open space, and the remaining portion of that would be natural heritage area. At this point, there's no users identified for the blocks. We're simply creating industrial blocks that would be subject to any future site plan approval by the county. From a policy framework perspective, Amanda provided a good overview. There's existing land use designations associated with industrial and commercial areas. The zoning is proposing to implement those. The lands have really a mix of existing zoning from agricultural to extractive, which just reflect historic uses and really the historic licensed aggregate operation. And then a portion of the lands are zoned M3. So what's being proposed really is a mix of heavy and light industrial. The zoning has identified a mix of the uses relative to consideration of land use compatibility with planned and existing residential uses. I kind of went over the draft plan of subdivision already, but as part of the comments received through adjacent application, recently the school board has identified the need for a potential new school, which would serve Paris and the Glen Morris catchment area. So we've had an initial discussion with the school board about the location of a school and it being somewhere in this area. So we're under discussion with the county and the school board on if there is an opportunity to accommodate a new school within this area. Number of studies have been submitted: functional servicing, stormwater management report relative to the proposed development, proposing full municipal services. This industrial land subdivision study and the residential land study together have been addressed from an engineering perspective, looking at those lands and catchment area associated with adjacent lands. Environmental impact assessment's been prepared and submitted. and transportation impact study's been prepared and submitted. Again, looking at industrial and residential traffic, and there are discussions associated with potential road alternatives in the works with county staff. So in conclusion, our opinion is that what's being proposed from a zoning bylaw and plan of subdivision perspective is consistent in conformity with provincial policy direction, conforms with the county official plan. The lands are located in an area where there are existing services, and services can be planned for the developments. Land use compatibility has been considered, and I would note that these lands have some history with regard to consideration for land use relative to submissions made through the official plan review. So the lands as industrial now are moving forward relative to decisions associated with the lands being industrial within the official plan. So that's my presentation for this evening, and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you today. First, it's nice to hear the school board's forward thinking about the needs of schools within our community. That's always good to hear. This is the first I've heard of it, but I'm happy to hear it. I share Councillor Bell's concern / skepticism about the access from Dundas Street somewhere between Swiss Chalet and the bridge, I think is what is intended and planned. I have some concerns with that, but Councillor Bell may want to tackle that one in more detail. Although at the same time, I want to say anything that takes pressure off Curtis Ave South.
Just excuse me, Councillor House, we're not deliberating, we're asking questions.
I'm coming to you. Yeah. Thank you. The section 8 that was in that area, I just want to make sure, I think you've clarified it, but I just want to make sure, section, which is kind of the standalone pod aside from the other area, that's only going to be a stormwater management pond and natural features, hence the requirement to change from agricultural to natural heritage zoning, correct?
To you, Mr. Chair, correct.
Thank you.
And just through you, Mr. Chair, and the other questions, maybe I can, because you asked it, maybe I can help Councillor Bell. He may not have to ask it. The emergency access that's being proposed really is emergency access. So it would be like a bollard or some type of restriction that it would only be for emergency fire access to come in through that road, emergency corridor. That's not proposed as a public road or access. Really the objective would be to have those lands develop in conjunction with the adjacent commercial lands and find some way of access through those lands as a means to kind of a comprehensive development of that area. And the school board, yeah, that's relatively new, like 2 weeks ago. We had the comment and had a follow-up discussion, and they're going to share some additional information with us so we can see how we can accommodate that type of planning that they're doing, and a request to identify a potential site for them.
Okay, Councillor Bell's question has been answered probably. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of these lands now are zoned resource extraction. Is that gravel or gypsum or both? Do you know?
To you, Mr. Chair, it's gravel.
Okay, and just a question related to that. Is there a lot of grading that needs to be done for this site, given that a lot of gravel's been taken out over the years?
To you, Mr. Chair, not on this portion. The residential portion, a little bit more grading in that area, but on this portion, the industrial, there's not a significant amount of grading to be done.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking at where the stormwater management pond goes. It looks like it would flow down. So, okay, thank you.
Any final questions? Okay, stand by, Dave, and I'll just see if there's any comments or questions from the audience. This is your opportunity for members of the audience to make comment on the proposal. Anyone wish to make comment on the Curtis Avenue proposal, I'll call it. I'll ask a second time. And a final time. I see no comments from the public, so you don't have to return. And I'll just ask the planner if he has anything final.
No further comments, thanks.
Okay, then I'm in a position where I can adjourn the public hearing with regard to this application. And that concludes our public hearings for this evening and moves us on to the next item on the agenda, and that is on the addenda. Oh, most sorry, we got to do that. I wondered why Councillor Pierce was giving me the funny look. Councillor Pierce moves that it be received and forwarded on, and Councillor Coleman seconds it. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, Councillor Pierce. I was ahead of myself. Agricultural Advisory Committee report is on the addendum. Would someone move that it be received? Councillor Coleman and Mayor Bailey. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion's carried. The report is received. Under other business, I had an issue, or an item, I'll call it, unassumed subdivisions. And this stems from an email I received, and Councillor Miller will know what I'm talking about, with regard to a resident who lives in a subdivision that the infrastructure has not been assumed. I'm not going to talk about that specific case since it does, it's probably an in-camera situation, but I will forward that email to the planning department and ask that it be circulated to be placed on an agenda, perhaps an in-camera agenda, because it deals with specific properties and a specific person. But the issue is people that buy residences in subdivisions that are recently constructed and have the infrastructure has not been assumed. And we've all driven by, we've seen signs, road unassumed, use at own risk. We have them in Brant County. Tillsonburg has huge billboard signs. And I'm just asking, and I gave the heads up to the planners on perhaps you can just outline a little bit on the process of assuming infrastructure in subdivisions as they are being constructed, because there are issues when people are living in subdivisions with unassumed infrastructure, and situations crop up, and in some cases infrastructure is assumed easily and readily. In other cases it can be a long, exhaustive, frustrating process lasting up to 10 and 12 years, which is probably unacceptable, I think, from anybody's standpoint. With that introduction and with the understanding that I'm going to be talking about a specific case, probably at our next planning committee meeting in camera, could you just perhaps either the general manager or the chief planning official maybe educate us a little bit on the process of assuming infrastructure in subdivisions? That may have looked like it's blindsiding staff, but I gave them a heads up on this.
Sure. Through you, Chair Chambers, absolutely staff can get something together for the next PDC in September.
Sorry, I missed that, Pam. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
Yes, through you, Chair Chambers, staff can get something together for the next PDC in September.
Okay, understanding that the issues that relates to this particular property would be in camera, but I would like a kind of a report on, in general, assuming subdivisions. Okay, stay tuned for that at our next meeting. Councilor Miller.
I was going to ask Mr. Chair if in their report, they could maybe also talk about what homeowners can and can't do. I was shocked at some of the things they couldn't do because the county hadn't taken it over. So, and yeah, you're right. It's a very frustrated, and we can get into specifics in camera. Very frustrating. Thank you.
And my understanding, there are historical situations, and we've changed the process recently and to help with the process. That will all be in the report at our next meeting. So that actually concludes my item of other business, postponing it to next week or next month. And from what I can see, there's nothing else on the agenda other than the next meeting, which is, well, actually, it's not next month, it's in September. Forgot all about that. Or do we have planning committee meetings in August? We don't. Okay, August is coming. Hopefully we will remember my issue in September. Okay. This meeting is adjourned. Gee, all through the meeting I was saying it would be next month.